Welcome back. It's The Real Story with Jeanne Ives. And the topic today is going to be all about the gun ban and what's happening on guns around the state and the country. Let's start out with this item. Last Friday, a federal judge decided to halt the gun ban law that went into effect, or supposedly in January. He said, nope, you go ahead, you can purchase whatever weapons you want. Remember, that law banned over 170 different types of guns that people commonly bought. Now, they weren't assault rifles. They weren't machine guns or anything. They were simply guns that people purchased to hunt, for their own protection, and in various ways. Then we also had at the same time, because there's so many gun cases going around in the state. The other one deals with Robert Beavis. And if you don't remember Robert Beavis, I did a Real Story interview with him not that long ago, because remember, he's the Naperville gun shop owner who basically Naperville said, we don't want anybody to sell any guns whatsoever in Naperville. We're going to ban the sale of guns in Naperville. And this actually came on the heels of the Highland Park shooting that occurred last July, which is why I have my guest here as well. We're going to talk about that. But an update to Bob Beavis's case. Bob Beavis filed a lawsuit in federal court, and they have now, because he's literally almost out of money, it's so sad. I mean, I'm going to have him on an additional podcast on this. They are bankrupting this man for selling guns that are legal. And, by the way, and I think this is the most outrageous thing, so stick with me before I introduce my guest, but stick with me on this thing. The gun ban law literally says that if you're an Illinois resident, you can't own these guns going forward. If you already own these guns, guess what? You have to register with the state that you own these guns. We do not want a gun registry. That is not a Second Amendment right. But it gets worse, because they said if you are a gun manufacturer in the state of Illinois, go right ahead. Make all these guns. Sell them to Indiana. Sell them to Iowa. Sell them anywhere else you want. Just don't sell them to Illinois gun retailers. Now, is that insanity? They're worried about the guns, but they're letting the gun manufacturers still manufacture them and sell them elsewhere across the United States. It is insane. Everything about this policy is insane. It does not get to the root causes of gun violence and what creates it. So we've got a couple different cases going on. There's actually 2 different state cases going on the gun ban law. There are federal cases going on the gun ban law. And then there is Bob Beavis's case against Naperville. Now he's countersuing Naperville for loss of income and also and civil rights action as well. He's got another lawsuit against them. The Supreme Court is looking into basically doing an immediate injunction to allow him to sell weapons, because they're bankrupting him intentionally. This is so shameful of the city of Naperville to do it, because he could literally just locate across the street in Lisle. Of course, that would cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars to move his shop, but they don't care. Oh, go to Lisle and buy your gun. Come back over to Naperville and, go ahead, go to their shooting range and shoot it there in Naperville, but you can't buy a gun there. I mean, this is so stupid. Okay, so we've got all that going on in gun action, and then what happens? Well, that brings in my guest. My guest today in today's podcast is Susie Wahl. Susie Wahl is a Highland Park resident, and she's also a mental health expert, which is another reason she's perfect for this podcast. And Susie is also a parent who is concerned about what happened in Highland Park High School on April 4th. Now, I was reading the Chicago Tribune article. You lived through it to some degree, but let's just kind of recap what happened.
Sure.
Essentially, the Highland Park students had planned to have a protest, and their protest was all about banning assault weapons, which they couldn't even identify assault weapons if they really had to. They couldn't. No. They don't have that background or knowledge. But they wanted a nationwide assault weapons ban. Mm-hmm. That same day that the students did a walkout protest for this, that same time, 5 other students found themselves arrested because one student actually brought a gun into the high school.
Yep.
So tell me if I've got that right, and then tell me a little bit more about what happened.
Absolutely. You do have that right. And thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. Not happy with the situation, obviously, but Yes. So as a parent, you really never want to get a text from the school saying we're on a hard lockdown. And that's exactly what happened on April 4th. I was working at home, as I do, on my computer, and I hear a text come in, pick up my phone, and it's Highland Park High School is on a hard lockdown. Check your email. And, of course, you start calling the school. The line is, you actually get a busy signal, which I hadn't heard probably since 1985. And you don't know what's happening. It's terrifying for a parent. But my daughter and Highland Park High School was on a hard lockdown for about 2 hours. They were on the floor. She was in physics class. They were behind the physics lab table hiding. The physics teacher, who's about 60 years old and just had knee surgery, was at the classroom door with a sledgehammer. And, I find this all out later. They were dismissed about 2.5 hours early. They ended the school day about 12:25, and we were able to go pick them up. My daughter actually ended up taking the bus home because we found out at 12:22 they were being dismissed at 12:25. So the day itself was really terrifying, and sadly we didn't have any information until much, much later, and we still don't know exactly what happened. We do know that one student, 5 initially were arrested, but I think one was the actual gun holder and kept in custody. I don't know if that person is still in custody. I don't think they're back at school, but again, the school board will share nothing with us.
So you're getting no information from the school board.
None.
And so, I mean, this is terrifying because, as you told me earlier, this is literally 9 months to the day
9 months to
from
the
the
day.
July 4th tragedy.
Exactly.
Where dozens of people were slaughtered.
Yes.
Needlessly by a maniac sitting on top of the roof and aiming at people watching the 4th of July parade. I mean, Highland Park's been through a lot.
We have been through a lot, 100%.
When it comes to guns, and especially gun violence.
We've been through a lot, and I will say that this April 4th incident was completely preventable. I go back to 1988 when Lori Dan shot up a school in Winnetka.
Tell us about that, because that is a story that I was not aware of until you brought it up.
Yes.
And I think it's really important for people to realize this, because they think this is just a modern phenomenon.
No.
That the mass shooting thing is, I mean, granted, maybe it's modern in terms of, it's 1980s on type of thing. I mean, we didn't probably see this in the 1920s so much or anything like that. But it's not like it just all started in the last decade.
No, especially, I feel, and a security expert who I can refer to later told me the North Shore schools are really a soft target. And that started in 1988 with Lori Dan. She went it was an elementary school in Winnetka, Hubbard Woods area. I think it's actually called Hubbard Woods Elementary, maybe. And 6 people were shot. 1 young boy lost his life. And what's shocking to me is I actually pulled up that footage a few days ago, and really, except for the clothing and hair, it could literally be the same scene that was all over the news on April 4th in Highland Park. Literally the same. And to me, it's unconscionable. Why aren't we not protecting our most precious assets? I actually worked, another part of my background, for United Airlines, and 21 years. And I worked for them, September 11th, I was there. It was awful. We lost colleagues. The loss of life then was astounding. But after that loss of life, an entire new government agency was created, the TSA, and they're every day they're violating our constitutional rights to, unlawful search and seizure, right? And everyone just accepts this. And this agency is extremely well funded. Every airport, in fact, when I worked for United, there were certain certain cities in third world countries we wouldn't fly to for lack of security. Now we're protecting, rightfully so, all the airline passengers, all the airport staff, all our staff on board. However, we don't protect our most precious assets, our children.
And that was proven out in the Covenant. School shooting that just happened, it's just alarming because it happens literally 10 days, 2 weeks before the April
know.
4th incident.
I know.
So everybody's parent has that on their mind.
Of
And then they get the
course.
call that we're in lockdown.
Yeah, it was
And
actually
then-
a text. I mean,
yes,
if you can
a
believe
text.
it.
A
And no
text.
one you could call. And I was,
Right.
of course, texting and calling my daughter, incessantly. And she says she could hear, she has her phone on vibrate during the day. She could hear her phone in her backpack vibrating, but she was on the floor across the room.
So this was a real incident.
Yes.
There were 5 kids arrested. There
Yes.
was one that did have an actual gun.
An actual gun, yes.
To your knowledge, nobody knows his whereabouts. Nobody knows what's happened to him. Nobody knows anything about him because he's a minor.
He's a minor, so no information
No
has
information
been released.
whatsoever. Regardless, though, that you would think
Yes.
that you would at least, without divulging a name or anything,
Right.
you would get some idea
Right.
about what is happening with him.
100%.
Now, are any of those children still back at school?
I think that the other 4, I have heard that they are back at school.
Okay.
Although I know my daughter is a freshman, so she doesn't personally know these kids. So I can't 100% verify, but I have heard that.
So you guys are not crazy right-wingers. You're not crazy liberals. You're just parents who want their kids protected.
we're
and
just
so a group
parents.
of you got together
A
very
group of us
quickly
got
and
together
went to the
very-
school board meeting. And
Right.
how did that go?
So thankfully, a group of us, some of us already knew each other. We got together. One of our very prominent members, Jenny, who you've had here, Jeanne
Yes.
Ives, she's been a huge advocate for metal detectors in schools. So of course we
In
roped
fact, let's
her
just
in.
pause there,
Yes.
remember, because if you have been following the real story with Jeanne Ives,
Yes.
I had Jenny Harjung on right after the Highland Park shooting because she really wanted to get the message out
Yes.
about this. And this was like probably the end of July by the time I
Yes.
got her on my podcast. And her biggest concern
Yes.
was, how do I send my kids back to school
Yes.
safely? That was her number one concern.
100%. And
Okay.
she, as always, was spot on. It was almost like a prophecy. And I am so thankful, I will say, first of all, this was for Highland Park High School, a cheap warning. And I said that to the
Yes.
board. We got off, yes, our kids are emotionally, they are definitely damaged. But we got off without anyone being physically harmed. My God. And if you combine April 4th and July 4th, I would say, and I've said to our board, we have said, what more do you need? It's as if they're actually waiting for carnage before they do something. So back to your question, yes, a group of us organized, and the board called a security meeting, a special security meeting on April 11th. So it took them an entire week. And at that meeting, there was, of course, public comment. And luckily, we had been organized. We had about 5, 6 of us. We completely controlled the narrative. And then, Jeannie, it was almost surreal. The way the board spoke after we spoke, it was as if we were reading them our grandmother's tuna casserole recipes, or reading out of the phone book. It was almost like we didn't even speak to them. One of the board members, and I'm not making this up, it is on the recording, even spoke about, well, if we think about metal detectors, we have to think about equity. Dan Struck, one of the board members. And
what does
yes,
that mean?
I wish I knew. To me, it seems like a little bit of a veiled racist comment.
Okay, but let's be honest.
I don't
with
know.
I believe at one point they did show a picture of the alleged a perpetrator.
Yes.
I mean, he didn't shoot, but the alleged guy who brought the weapon to
Yes.
school, and I believe he's Hispanic.
I believe he's of Hispanic descent. I believe, but I don't. Again, I
Okay.
don't know personally. But
Are there any other rumors surrounding him?
yeah, there are rumors of gang ties as well. And,
Okay.
and I do believe this person lives in Highwood. And
So what's
Highwood
the
does
equity there? What's the equity question? I don't get that.
And here's a
What do metal detectors have to do with equity?
I would
It doesn't matter
love
who
to
you
know.
are when you go through a TSA line.
yes. You are searched.
It's
you
like
are,
going to communion.
It is.
Honestly,
It is.
All
It is.
all are welcome. All comers. You
Yes.
got to go through the line. Got to do the right
Yes.
ritual.
And I think,
I don't get that.
I don't either. I don't understand, but I think, and I would say to this member, forget equity. Our children are in danger. They're not black children, white children, Hispanic children, Asian children. They are our children. They are in danger. I don't care what race they are. If you shoot a child, if a child dies,
What's their solution? Do they have a solution?
So we've had to go back to another board meeting 2 weeks later on April 25th. And I will say we've done extensive media outreach, and thank goodness we've had media coverage. We had to get in front of the board again. And, in some of my clips, you'll see I'm actually shouting at them. And I'm generally a nice, level-headed person, but when I get in front of these people
because it's blank stare.
It's blank stare, and they are holding my child's life in their hands. And I want to say to them, how dare you? How dare you be so complacent, so lazy? And all they're doing is pontificating, lots of virtue signaling. But at the last meeting, they actually, our superintendent actually said out loud, like, you're not supposed to say the quiet part out loud. Wow, if we do metal detectors in Highland Park, I guess we'd have to do them in Deerfield too. And he's the superintendent of District 113, which is Deerfield and Highland Park High School. There's your equity, right? Of course you're going to do them at both high schools.
Of course you would.
And
but it can't be cost. Let's be honest. These guys are not flush with cash.
Flush. $29,200 per student spend. I've got the spend here.
$29,200 per student spend.
Actually, $233.
Do you happen to have their academic achievement score? I mean, I'm happy to look it up.
I don't have it, but
I'm happy to look that up while we discuss other ththings. But
of course,
because
but if you want
$29,200 per student,
233, yes. And by comparison, I did state all this at the board meeting, but CPS, Chicago Public Schools, spends $29,307, so about $74 more per student. They have metal detectors.
Oh, okay, so wait a minute. So CPS has metal detectors
in the high schools. I've seen them, yes.
In their high schools. Mm-hmm. So it's got to be, I think it's their image. They just would ruin their image that they're a community,
right?
Because look, we're the community that loves on people.
Yes.
We're the community
we're Highland Park strong.
We're Highland Park strong, exactly. Right? Yeah.
What does that mean?
It
is unfortunately
hate has no home there.
Right.
Hate has no home there. So
and
you can't then put metal detectors in the high school,
because
right?
hate has no home, right? And I say, well, I think unfortunately what we've seen of this board is that they're very committed to virtue signaling and very uncommitted to action, and it really defies logic. But at least at the last board meeting, they were kind of talking about metal detectors. At least the words came out of their mouth. And then after the board meeting, we got an email that they're going to hire or use a consultant they've used in the past. I'm not sure which. And there'll be another meeting yet on May 30th. So we're almost, 2 months out from the incident. And they've made it clear that nothing will happen till next year. Also, Bruce Law, our overpaid superintendent.
It can't be that difficult to put in a metal detector. Like it could have been done.
Oh, it could have been done by April 11th when they had the first meeting.
Sure.
So now we're 2 board meetings. We're on the edge of a third. Sure. And I will tell the board, we're going to be prepared for that meeting. And if they think there's been media presence to date, we'll get more.
What does the union say? What does the teacher union say? What do teachers say? Or do they just zip it?
So 113 is not unionized.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Isn't that amazing?
That's
but
amazing.
I've reached out to one teacher who I know to be conservative, and I thought that she and I could have a dialogue, and there's been no reply. I think the teachers are scared to stand up. It's amazing that it seems to me that people, Highland Park residents and teachers, staff, are scared of this board, and there's nothing to be scared of. They have no merit whatsoever that I've seen. What are you scared of? And, as a mom, my primary duty is to protect my child. So if there's a target on my back, I'm going to actually wear that as a badge of honor. I'm going to bring it to my front and say, go ahead, bring it on, game on. I'm going to protect my child no matter what.
Did the police chief say anything? Do you know, is he part of this conversation? Is the mayor? I mean, let's face it. If people may not realize, I mean, Highland Park is one of two communities, if not the only one, who in 2013, when we passed a concealed carry law, they immediately passed a law saying that they will be, assault weapons free.
Assault weapons free. And look how that panned out on
and
July
they only
4th.
had 10 days to do that. And of course, it panned out not whatsoever because they weren't able to do anything. And again, the hate has no home crowd there, right?
Don't forget the gun stickers with the circle and the line through it.
Okay, so they have those
Lots
stickers.
of those.
Lots of those.
And what that says, you combine those stickers with the assault weapons ban, it says we are sitting ducks in Highland Park.
Well,
That's
they had
all
the
it
most
says.
horrific tragedy that I can think of around Illinois.
100%.
I mean, is there another one?
No, I mean, the tragedy that I remember most before that is the Lori Dan incident, and there was only one death, whereas Highland Park, I think the total death was 6. But I don't know the number of injured for the July 4th incident. But yes, dozens shot.
It was dozens.
Oh, absolutely. Dozens
or something.
Injured. But I believe the total death count 6. And so in terms of the North Shore, those two tragedies stand out. And on April 4th, I want to say we almost had another tragedy, but completely preventable. Completely.
I mean,
and you said how easy it is to buy metal detectors. If you go online right now, Uline, which is a very smart company that headquartered in Pleasant Prairie instead of coming to Illinois, you can order one for about $4,000. You could literally drive up to Pleasant Prairie and grab it and have it within a day. If our board wanted to do something, they would be doing it. So now what Bruce Law says, they're hiring.
Bruce Law is the superintendent for people who are listening. He's the superintendent who used to be at Hinsdale.
He used to be in District 86.
And now his whole package is about $300,000.
About $300,000. And District 86, they had a petition to get rid of him. They were successful.
Oh, and so then he ends up in Highland Park. So a very, very wealthy district, Hinsdale.
Yes.
Gets rid of their superintendent, and he ends up in another very, very wealthy district, Highland Park, as the superintendent.
Yes. And guess what? Hinsdale started testing in January.
What?
Metal detectors.
Oh.
Yes. And I'd love to, if you'll indulge me for a sec, could I read the last line? So Hinsdale had this petition circulating. They got about 390 signatures, which is pretty good for a high school district. And what they said about Bruce Law, I mean, it's quite long, but the last line I think is so poignant. And I will say this about Bruce Law and our board. And they said, most of all, our students deserve a superintendent who values their well-being more than anything else. And this board does not value the well-being of our community, the well-being of our students, the well-being of our parents.
Are you anticipating another petition to oust him again?
I would like to start one. However, I would like to see what happens on May 30th.
Right, you want to see if they can get some actual results. Maybe he'll listen.
Right, maybe. But I think that at the point where we are happy with the results, it's absolutely time to get rid of him. This is not his first folly. He's had quite a few, most notably.
There's a lot of superintendents that just circulate around the state, to be quite honest with you.
They do. And you know what's super scary, Jeannie, as I've done the research? The superintendent and the board are accountable to nobody. I called our regional director in Lake County.
Well, they're supposed to be accountable to the voters.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what elections matter.
I know. Elections have consequences. Yeah. But unfortunately, besides the voters, they're not accountable to anyone else. There's a regional superintendent, Dr. Michael Carner in Lake County, who's useless. I've called the Illinois State Board of Education. And they refer me to websites.
Voters. The voters have to take, the school board controls it, and the school board, weak school boards listen to the administration headed by a superintendent who came up through the ranks of the teaching profession and the administration of profession, who is going to do the bidding of the people who he went up through the ranks with, rather than the bidding of the board. If you don't have a strong school board, you're going to be controlled by the bureaucracy, and that is exactly what's happening everywhere in Illinois. I want to focus. We've got about 5 minutes left. Sure. I want to focus on your mental health professional.
Yes and no. I'm a practice manager, so I'm not an actual clinician.
Okay, all right. But maybe you can speak to this, though.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing in your mental health practice?
Sure.
I mean, what are the type of cases that are coming in?
Sure.
What are the age groups?
Sure.
Yeah, just tell
Well, I
us more.
can't really comment specifically,
Okay,
and I
sure.
don't have access to any type of patient records, but I
course
do
not.
help our intake team. I will say our practice, like every other practice, the demand outweighs the supply exponentially. And we are working so hard, like every practice, to hire therapists, but there's only so many available for hire. And I think that's going to continue. You know, what was done to society during the lockdowns, in blue states particularly, of course, my gosh, the impact on mental health, and this is just my life observation, not as a professional. So many people are struggling, and it seems that there's just no end to it. It really does. And unfortunately, I think demand will continue to outweigh supply in the mental health industry. I really do.
You mentioned that your office is constantly full.
We are. Yeah, as soon we are always, even though we do try and accommodate as best we can, it's really hard in our peak hours because, of course, most peak hours are after school and evening and weekends. It's tough to find spots, but we are not alone. We are definitely not alone. I think every mental health practice, I know every mental health practice is in the same boat as we are right now.
Well, I would say that, when it comes to the students and the teenagers, there's a real push in the school systems to essentially say, for in many cases, we're not going to engage the parents on particular issues.
Oh, I've heard this.
We're going to let our own mental health professionals in our school system engage the student and not necessarily involve the parents.
I've
So-
heard that.
Now, there's probably, obviously, schools are a conduit to discovering abuse. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, of course.
I mean, everybody knows that.
Yeah.
They're in touch in certain ways. But there's a little something more nefarious going on, and that is that the schools are now overstepping parental rights, and they're essentially. Obviously, they've got all of them have these gender affirming plans where if the student wants to pretend that they are a sex that they are not biologically, are, then and they don't want their parents to know, then they can help them transition on their own. Now, this is horrific, but it goes to the other thing, which is, at what point are the parents? Do the parents have some responsibility in all of this?
Oh, 100%.
100%. So, I mean, and I would say that's true, like of the teenagers, the chaos that the teenagers caused in Chicago just a couple weekends ago.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, come on. Don't just. First of all, there were hundreds of teenagers, and
Yeah.
I think there was, what was it? 16 people. 9 adults and 7 kids or something were arrested. Yeah. Where are the parents?
I wish I knew.
Where are the parents in all of this? I mean, I look at this and I don't know why a high school student brought the gun to school. Obviously, he doesn't have parents that care or something's going on there.
Or they didn't know. I don't know. I don't know much about his case, but I will say one comment I'd love to make is on the metal detectors and parents and mental health, et cetera, is some of the resistance I've seen is that we don't want a mother actually said this to me. So this is my experience.
Okay.
Well, I don't want my daughter to feel like she's in a prison. And I said to her, better a prison than a coffin. And she actually got it. But I would say this is a time for parents to take the wheel. When I pray we do install metal detectors, and not just at Highland Park, I'd like to see them at schools nationwide. It is up to the parents. It is up to us to say to our students, to educate them, no, you're not in a prison. And I also think that comment is a bit ridiculous, given that, especially in a community like Highland Park, where there is great wealth, these kids have flown. They've traveled. They've gone through metal detectors.
Right. Yeah.
So I think in terms of mental health, the first line of defense, shall I say, and I'm speaking as a mother, should be the parents. The parents need to take the wheel back from these administrators and teachers who may be overstepping their boundaries or projecting. Like, for example, if the board projects that the students will feel that they're in prison. No, no, no. Let us, the parents, handle that. You invest in the infrastructure to keep them safe, which is actually their job. We will handle the rest.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I would think that the police department would be on top of this. I think that they would be all in favor of it. Better to have warning ahead of time than to have to respond to something like they had in Uvalde, and where the police did not respond. I imagine the police were great with their response on that day.
They were, but as I understand, it still took 10 minutes. And
and so that the teacher with the sledgehammer, I'm sorry, if the guy's got
I know.
And
we love him.
He a shotgun and whatever. I mean, I bet he's a great guy.
He's a wonderful man, and he just had knee surgery, and God bless him for getting down on the floor and doing that. But again, I said this to some of the media, the sledgehammer defense, that would be fine in 1823, maybe 1923. But in 2023, can't we do better for our children?
Well, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeanne.
I'll have you back. I'll definitely want an update about how you guys progress with your request to get metal detectors in. And I want to find out more about eventually what happens with the student that brought the gun to the school. Everybody needs to know. They need to know that their kids are going to be safe and that the guy is not there anymore. So
100%. You got it.
Well, thanks for joining me on The Real Story with Jeanne Ives. Appreciate it.
Thank you.